When two legends clash over who deserves the title, King of Cool, the results can be career-defining. You're about to witness the moment when Hollywood's most confident action star learned that real coolness isn't about attitude, it's about capability so natural it looks effortless. Subscribe to discover more untold stories of when manufactured confidence met authentic mastery and got destroyed in ways that changed everything. The cigarette fell from Steve McQueen's lips in slow motion, hitting the Warner Brothers soundstage floor with the soft impact of a man's ego being shattered into irreparable pieces. At 35 years old, and riding the peak of his fame as Hollywood's newest action icon, McQueen had just witnessed something that challenged everything he understood about coolness, speed, and what it meant to be authentically dangerous in a world of manufactured tough guys. What had just happened on that August afternoon in 1965 wasn't just a demonstration of superior marksmanship. It was the moment when Hollywood's self-proclaimed King of Cool discovered that real mastery could make his carefully constructed image look like amateur theatrics, delivered by someone who never needed to prove he was cool because coolness radiated from him like a natural force. Sammy Davis Jr., at 40 years old, calmly adjusted his cufflinks and looked at the stunned McQueen with an expression that mixed genuine sympathy with the quiet amusement of someone who had just provided an education in the difference between appearing dangerous and being naturally lethal. This is the untold story of the day, when two definitions of coolness collided, when attitude met authentic capability, and when 0.13 seconds redefined which man had the right to call himself the true King of Cool. August 1965 at Warner Brothers represented Steve McQueen at the absolute pinnacle of his cultural influence and personal arrogance. At 35, he had achieved the rare entertainment industry accomplishment of becoming genuinely cool rather than just playing cool characters, and his recent successes in The Great Escape and The Cincinnati Kid had established him as the defining figure of a new generation of anti-heroes who represented authenticity in an industry built on artifice. But success had created an ego that required constant validation and feeding, particularly when it came to his reputation as someone who possessed genuine capabilities rather than just acting ability. McQueen prided himself on doing his own stunts, riding his own motorcycles, and maintaining the kind of authentic competence that separated him from other actors who merely played tough guys without being tough guys. Which is why he was so threatened by the presence of Sammy Davis Jr. during the production of a variety special that would feature several major stars in segments designed to showcase their individual talents and personalities. The problem with entertainers like Sammy, McQueen was explaining to a group of studio executives and crew members, is that they're all show and no substance. They can sing, they can dance, they can put on a good performance, but when it comes to authentic capability, they're just performers. His commentary was delivered with the casual authority of someone whose reputation was based on genuine competence rather than theatrical approximation. But the subtext was clearly intended to establish hierarchies of authenticity that placed action stars above variety entertainers. Real coolness, McQueen continued, comes from actually being able to do the things that make you dangerous, not just from being able to pretend to do them convincingly. Sammy was nearby, reviewing script changes with the director. But McQueen's commentary was obviously intended to be overheard and to provoke a response that would allow McQueen to demonstrate his superior authenticity publicly. "I mean, look at Sammy over there," McQueen said, raising his voice slightly to ensure his target could hear the assessment. "Great entertainer, no question about that. But when it comes to real capabilities, real danger, real coolness, we're talking about completely different categories of performer." Sammy looked up from his script, recognizing McQueen's deliberate provocation, and walked over to where McQueen was holding court with his audience of industry professionals. "Steve," Sammy said pleasantly, "I couldn't help but overhear your analysis of authentic capability versus theatrical performance. It sounds like you've given the subject considerable thought." McQueen smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose expertise had been properly acknowledged by a fellow performer, completely missing the subtle irony in Sammy's diplomatic tone. "I have," McQueen replied with obvious pride. The thing that separates real action stars from entertainers is that we can actually do the things we portray on screen. We're not just acting dangerous. We are dangerous. Sammy nodded thoughtfully, as if receiving valuable educational information about the distinction between different types of performers. That's a fascinating perspective, Sammy said. Very clear hierarchy of authenticity. He paused, maintaining his characteristic diplomatic politeness. Though I wonder if there might be different definitions of what real danger and authentic capability actually look like in practice. McQueen interpreted Sammy's response as evidence that the entertainer was interested in learning about genuine competence from someone who possessed legitimate credentials in that area. There's really only one definition that matters, McQueen said with the confidence of someone who had never encountered serious competition in the coolness category. The ability to perform under pressure, to handle yourself in situations that require real skill rather than just theatrical presentation. Sammy's expression suggested that he found McQueen's analysis intellectually interesting but perhaps not complete. So you're saying that authentic coolness should be judged through practical demonstration rather than entertainment value? Sammy asked. Exactly, McQueen confirmed. That's what separates the king of cool from pretenders. When you can back up your image with real capability, you're operating in a different league entirely. The phrase king of cool was McQueen's self-applied title, and his use of it in this context was clearly intended to establish that he viewed himself as occupying the pinnacle of authentic coolness, while other performers represented inferior approximations. Sammy considered McQueen's philosophy with the thoughtful attention he gave to most technical discussions. That makes sense from a practical perspective, Sammy agreed. Very logical framework for determining hierarchy. He maintained his pleasant expression while continuing. Of course, that assumes that the most impressive capabilities are the ones that look impressive, rather than the ones that are so natural they don't need to look impressive. McQueen looked puzzled by the distinction Sammy was making. What do you mean? Well, Sammy said, what if the highest level of coolness comes from being so naturally capable that you never need to prove it? What if authentic mastery is about making impossible things look effortless rather than making easy things look difficult? McQueen's competitive instincts engaged immediately, sensing that this conversation was moving toward territory where he could demonstrate his superiority through direct comparison of capabilities. Are you suggesting that hiding your abilities is more impressive than demonstrating them? McQueen asked. I'm suggesting we might want to test our different definitions of coolness under practical conditions, Sammy replied with characteristic diplomatic politeness. The suggestion created immediate excitement among the assembled studio personnel, who recognized that they were about to witness either a confirmation of McQueen's promoted superiority or an upset that would challenge conventional assumptions about who deserved the title of Hollywood's coolest performer. McQueen was delighted by the prospect of demonstrating his capabilities in front of an audience that included several influential industry professionals. This was exactly the kind of validation opportunity that fed his ego and reinforced his reputation as someone whose coolness was based on authentic competence rather than manufactured image. What kind of test? McQueen asked, though he was already confident about the outcome. Simple demonstration, Sammy said. Since you mentioned the importance of handling yourself in situations that require real skill, maybe we should see who can perform better under pressure. Word of the impromptu challenge spread quickly through the soundstage, and within minutes a substantial crowd had gathered to witness what most assumed would be an educational demonstration of action star superiority over variety entertainer competence. A prop master appeared with gun belts and timing equipment that had been prepared for a Western-themed segment in the variety show. McQueen immediately began examining the equipment with the systematic attention he brought to all technical matters, ensuring that everything met his standards for authentic capability demonstration. Real quick draw requires understanding the relationship between speed, accuracy, and coolness under pressure. McQueen explained to the assembled observers as he prepared. It's not just about being fast. It's about maintaining complete control while performing at maximum capability. Sammy watched McQueen's preparation with polite interest, but made no move to examine equipment or optimize his setup. He remained in his characteristic relaxed posture, looking like someone attending a technical demonstration rather than preparing to participate in serious competition. McQueen strapped on his gun belt with practiced efficiency, adjusted his stance for optimal performance, and entered the mental state of focused intensity that he considered essential for authentic coolness under pressure. "The thing about real coolness," McQueen continued his lecture, "is that it comes from genuine confidence in your ability to perform when performance matters. That's what separates authentic cool from theatrical cool." Sammy accepted a gun belt from the prop master and buckled it around his waist with casual attention, as if he were adjusting regular clothing rather than preparing specialized equipment for competitive demonstration. "Aren't you going to check your equipment?" McQueen asked, noting Sammy's apparent lack of systematic preparation. "I think it's fine," Sammy replied, lighting a cigarette with the same casual attention he gave to most routine activities. McQueen looked at Sammy's relaxed approach to what he considered serious business with the expression of someone who was beginning to understand that this would be more educational than competitive. A Warner Brothers assistant director volunteered to oversee the demonstration, setting up electronic timing equipment and establishing rules that would ensure objective measurement of their competing approaches to coolness and capability. "Standard quick draw," the assistant director announced. "Speed and accuracy both count. We'll see which approach to coolness produces superior results under pressure." "Ready?" the assistant director called. McQueen took his carefully calculated stance, every element positioned for maximum efficiency and optimal performance. His preparation reflected years of systematic work to develop authentic capabilities that would support his reputation as someone whose coolness was based on genuine competence. Sammy remained in his casual posture, cigarette still burning between his lips, showing no signs of systematic preparation or competitive intensity. His approach suggested someone who was participating in a friendly demonstration rather than serious competition for the title of King of Cool. "Draw!" the assistant director commanded. What happened next created one of the most talked-about moments in Warner Brothers history and established a new benchmark for what authentic coolness looked like when it operated beyond the boundaries of manufactured image and entered the realm of natural mastery. McQueen's draw was impressive, professional, and executed with the kind of systematic competence that demonstrated everything his action star reputation suggested he could achieve. His speed of 0.21 seconds was genuinely fast, his accuracy was perfect, and his performance proved that his coolness was based on legitimate capability rather than just theatrical presentation. But Sammy Davis Jr. had already drawn, aimed, fired, and returned his weapon to its holster while taking a contemplative drag from his cigarette, all in 0.13 seconds, that belonged in the realm of supernatural capability rather than human achievement. McQueen stood frozen, his weapon only partially drawn, the cigarette falling from his lips as he stared at Sammy with the expression of someone whose entire professional identity had just been obliterated by evidence that coolness operated in categories he had never imagined possible. The assembled crowd remained silent for nearly a full minute, trying to process what they had witnessed. Several crew members actually checked their equipment, thinking something had malfunctioned. McQueen was the first to speak, and his words carried the bewilderment of someone whose understanding of coolness and capability had just been fundamentally challenged. "How?" was all McQueen could manage. Sammy took another drag from his cigarette and looked at McQueen with the patient expression of someone who had just provided a gentle education rather than a devastating demonstration. "Different approach," Sammy said with his characteristic understatement. But McQueen's analytical mind was struggling to process the implications of what had happened. If Sammy could perform at this level while maintaining such casual demeanor, then everything McQueen had believed about coolness, authentic capability, and what it meant to be genuinely dangerous was based on incomplete understanding of what mastery actually looked like. "Show me that again," McQueen requested, his professional curiosity overwhelming his personal devastation. The second demonstration was even more impossible. 0.12 seconds of precision that exceeded anything in McQueen's experience, accomplished while Sammy maintained perfect casual conversation with a nearby crew member about dinner plans. McQueen attempted his own follow-up draw, concentrating completely on applying maximum focus and systematic technique. But the harder he tried to match Sammy's performance, the more his own results deteriorated rather than improved. "I don't understand," McQueen said finally, his voice carrying the confusion of someone whose expertise had been revealed as amateur-level competence. "Everything I know about coolness and capability says that shouldn't be possible." Sammy's explanation revealed not just superior technique, but access to mastery that existed outside McQueen's entire framework for understanding coolness and authentic capability. "Steve, you've approached coolness like a performance," Sammy said, his tone carrying genuine respect for McQueen's systematic efforts. "You've developed authentic capabilities, systematic techniques, and genuine competence. That's impressive work, and it's real rather than fake." He gestured toward McQueen's professional setup and systematic approach. "But I approached coolness like a natural state rather than an achievement. Not by developing the ability to look cool under pressure, but by becoming so naturally capable that pressure becomes irrelevant." McQueen listened with the fascination of someone discovering that his area of expertise contained dimensions he had never previously considered. "When capability becomes natural enough," Sammy continued, "the distinction between performing coolness and being cool disappears entirely. You don't have to work at being cool because coolness becomes your default state, rather than something you achieve through effort." The explanation was philosophically sophisticated but practically devastating for McQueen, who was beginning to understand that his systematic approach to coolness represented not advancement but limitation compared to what Sammy had achieved naturally. "You're saying that my approach to being cool actually makes me less cool than your natural approach?" McQueen asked, his voice carrying the horror of someone whose life's work had just been revealed as fundamentally counterproductive. "I'm saying that different approaches work for different people," Sammy replied diplomatically. "But the highest level of coolness might be about transcending the need to be cool, rather than perfecting techniques for appearing cool." McQueen stood quietly for several minutes, trying to process the implications of what he had witnessed and learned. His reputation as the king of cool had been built on systematic development of authentic capabilities that had just been casually surpassed by someone operating according to completely different principles. The conversation that followed revealed the depth of McQueen's professional confusion and his struggle to understand how everything he had believed about coolness and capability could have been so fundamentally incomplete. "Sammy," McQueen said finally, his voice carrying a humility that was completely uncharacteristic for Hollywood's most confident action star. "Yeah, Steve? I think I need to reconsider what the title, King of Cool, actually means," McQueen said. "Because what you just demonstrated suggests that real coolness operates on levels I didn't know existed." Sammy accepted the acknowledgement with characteristic grace. "Coolness isn't a competition, Steve. It's just about being naturally comfortable with whatever capabilities you possess." But McQueen's ego was struggling to accommodate the revelation that his celebrated coolness represented intermediate-level performance compared to authentic mastery. The psychological impact of being so completely outclassed had created a crisis that would influence his approach to coolness for the rest of his career. Over the following years, McQueen's approach to his public image became notably less aggressive and more genuinely humble. Industry insiders observed that his encounter with Sammy had taught him the difference between working to be cool and naturally being cool. "Steve was never quite the same after that day," noted one veteran Hollywood observer. "He was still cool, still capable, still authentic, but he stopped trying so hard to prove it, and that actually made him cooler than he had been before." The incident became legendary among entertainment professionals as an example of how authentic mastery could redefine understanding of capability and coolness without destroying the person who had been surpassed. McQueen and Sammy maintained a respectful friendship for years afterward, with McQueen often citing Sammy as the coolest performer he had ever encountered. "Real coolness," McQueen would later reflect, "isn't about being the best at something. It's about being so naturally good at something that you don't need anyone to know you're the best." The lesson of that day extended beyond entertainment industry competition or personal ego adjustment. It was a demonstration of how authentic mastery could reshape understanding of excellence without humiliating those who had achieved competence through different methods. Years later, when McQueen was asked about the most important lesson of his career, he would often reference that afternoon at Warner Brothers as the day he learned the difference between manufactured cool and natural cool. "Sammy taught me that the coolest thing you can do is make impossible things look effortless," McQueen explained during a rare interview in the 1970s. "I had been working really hard to look cool while doing difficult things. But he showed me that real coolness comes from making everything look easy, even things that should be impossible." The 0.13 seconds had lasted only an instant, but the respect and understanding it created would last for decades, proving that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from having your assumptions challenged by someone whose mastery operates according to principles you never knew existed. And in Hollywood, where coolness was often more important than actual capability, McQueen's willingness to acknowledge superior mastery and learn from it actually enhanced his reputation rather than damaging it, demonstrating that authentic coolness included the wisdom to recognize when someone else had achieved levels of natural mastery that transcended competition entirely. Steve McQueen had entered that soundstage as the self-proclaimed king of cool, but he left understanding that real coolness wasn't about claiming titles. It was about developing such natural mastery that titles became irrelevant to your authentic capabilities.